executive branch.
So last time I checked, that's not a separation of powers issue.
That traditionally, as I've written, has been an executive branch.
Now, the question is, if someone's appointed as special counsel by Department of Justice regulations, who has authority over implementing those regulations and overseeing those regulations, all I can say is that that's different legally and factually than the Morrison situation where you had a statute. Let's talk a little bit about the law regarding the president. Clinton v. Jones tells us, see if I'm correct, that you can be president of the United States, you can still be sued for conduct before you were president, and when you invoke executive privilege, the court has said, no, wait a minute, you have to show up at a deposition because it happened before you were president. Is that correct?
In a civil suit was the Clinton versus Jones case involving allegations or a suit that had involved activity before President Clinton became president.
So it's pretty well understood through Supreme Court precedent that if you're the president of the United States and you engaged in conduct that allowed you to be sued before you got to be president, you can't avoid your day in court and on the civil side. The Nixon holding said what?
The Nixon holding said that in the context of the specific regulations there, that a criminal trial subpoena to the president for information, in that case the tapes, could be enforced, notwithstanding the executive privilege that was recognized in that case as rooted in Article 2 of the Constitution.
So that's the law of the land as of this moment.
That United States versus Nixon is the law of the land.
Okay, now whether or not a president can be indicted while in office has been a discussion that's gone on for a very long time. Is that true in the legal world?
That's correct. The Department of Justice for the last 45 years has taken the consistent position through Republican and Democratic administrations that a sitting president may not be indicted while in office. The most thorough opinion on that is written by Randy Moss, who was head of President Clinton's Office of Legal Counsel in 2000. He's now a district judge appointed by President Obama on the district court in D.C.
I think you have written on this topic as well, haven't you?
I've not written on the constitutionality.
You're talking about whether or not it would be wise to do this.
I've made my thoughts known for Congress to examine because in the wake of September 11th, I thought one of the things Congress could look at is how to make the presidency more effective.
I just want my Democratic colleagues to remind you that when President Clinton was being investigated, you took the position that he's not above the law, but in terms of indicting a sitting president, it would be better for the country to wait. And the person who echoed that the most, or at least effectively, I thought, from his point of view, was Joe Biden. So there's nothing new here, folks. When it's a Democratic president, they adopt the positions that they're arguing against now, but that's nothing new in politics. I'm sure we do the same thing. So this man, Judge Kavanaugh, is not doing anything wrong by talking about this issue the way he talks about it. What we're doing wrong is blending concepts to justify a vote that's going to be inevitable. You don't have to play these games to vote no. Just say you don't agree with his philosophy. You don't think he's qualified. But the thing that I hate the most is to take concepts and turn them around upside down to make people believe there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. The fault lies on our side. Most Americans, after this hearing, will have a dimmer view of the Senate. Rightly so. I don't want anybody to believe that you stole anything. Did you steal anything from anybody while you were working at the White House councils?
No.
Did you know that anybody stole anything, or did you encourage them to steal anything?
No.
Did you use anything knowingly that was stolen?
No.
So you can talk about Mr. Miranda, and he deserves all the scorn you can heap on him, but I don't want the public to believe that you did anything wrong, because I don't believe you did. So it's okay to vote no, but it's not okay to take legal concepts and flip them upside down and act like we're doing something wrong on the Republican side when you had the exact same position when it was your turn. Roe v. Wade. You've heard of that case, right?
I have, Senator.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't. It's an emotional debate in the country. Is there anything in the Constitution about a right to abortion? Is anything written in the document?
Senator, the Supreme Court has recognized the right to abortion since the 1973 Roe v. Wade case. It has reaffirmed it many times.
But my question is, did they find a phrase in the Constitution that said that the state cannot interfere with a woman's right to choose until medical viability occurs? Is that in the Constitution?
The Supreme Court applying the liberty...
It's pretty simple. No, it's not, Senator Graham.
Well, I want to...
But those words...
I want to be very careful, because this is a topic on which...
No, if you'll just follow me, I'll let you talk. But the point is, will you tell me, yes or no, is there anything in the document itself talking about limiting the state's ability to protect the unborn before viability? Is there any phrase in the Constitution about abortion?
The Supreme Court has found it under the Liberty Clause, but you're right that specifically...
Is there anything in the Liberty Clause talking about abortion?
The Liberty Clause refers to liberty.
Okay,
but
well,
does not
last
have
time I checked, liberty didn't equate to abortion. The Supreme Court said it did, but here's the point. What are the limits on this concept? You had 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 judges. What are the limits on the ability of the court to find a penumbra of rights that apply to a particular situation? What are the checks and balances of people in your business, if you can find 5 people who agree with you, to confer a right, whether the public likes it or not, based on this concept of a penumbra of rights? What are the outer limits to this?
The Supreme Court, in the Glucksberg case, which is in the late 90s, and Justice Kagan talked about this at her hearing, is the test that the Supreme Court uses to find unenumerated rights under the Liberty Clause of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, and that refers to rights rooted in the history and tradition of the country, so as to prevent...
So let me ask you this. Is there any right rooted in the history and traditions of the country where legislative bodies could not intercede on behalf of the unborn before medical viability? Is that part of our history?
The Supreme Court precedent has recognized the right to abortion.
I'm just saying, what part of the history of our... I don't think our founding fathers, people mentioned our founding fathers, I don't remember that being part of American history. So how did the court determine that it was?
The court applied the precedent that existed and found in 1973 that under the Liberty Clause...
Yeah, before 1970, I mean, when you talk about the history of the United States, the court has found that part of our history is for the legislative bodies not to have a say about protecting the unborn until medical viability. I haven't, whether you agree with it or not, I don't think that's part of our history. So, fill in the blank. What are the limits of people in your business applying that concept to almost anything that you think to be liberty?
And that is the concern that some have expressed about the concept of unenumerated rights.
Well, here's the concern I have, that you got one word that has opened up the ability for 5 people to tell everybody elected in the country, you can't go there. That this is an off limits for a democratic process. Whether you agree with Roe v. Wade or not, just think what could happen down the road if 5 people determine the word liberty means X. The only real check and balance is a constitutional amendment to change the ruling. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I'm not going to comment on potential constitutional amendments.
But, okay, how, if we pass a statute tomorrow in Congress saying that
And good day, everyone. I am Andrea Mitchell in Washington. We are going to, of course, keep bringing you all of the news from Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing throughout our program this hour. But starting first with new reaction now to the scathing anonymous column in the New York Times, the column engulfing the Trump White House. The column written by a, quote, senior administration official, according to the Times, the paper's opinion page editor refusing, though, to explain whether that means a cabinet-level secretary or a deputy or one of thousands of mid-level aides in the White House or one of the agencies. President Trump, in a fury, described by aides to NBC News as volcanic in response to being described in the column as amoral, impetuous, petty, and ineffective. First reacting when he heard about it from his aides, alerted by NBC's Peter Alexander.
There's an anonymous op-ed from the New York Times that says, I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. Just
Hey, Mr. Sheriff, can you imagine this? We have somebody in what I call the failing New York Times that's talking about he's part of the resistance within the Trump administration.
This person works for the administration.
Deal with. It's really a disgrace. I will say this. Nobody has done what this administration's done in terms of getting things passed and getting things through. When you tell me about some anonymous source within the administration, probably who's failing and probably here for all the wrong reasons.
Today, top cabinet officials denying that they are the anonymous writer. Vice President Pence, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, HUD Secretary Ben Carson, all issuing written denials. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo responding during a visit to India today.
If that piece is true, if it's accurate, if it's actually, I think they described it as a senior administration official, they should not well have chosen to take a disgruntled, deceptive, bad actor's word for anything and put it in their newspaper. It's sad more than anything else that our nation's come to where you have, if it is what it is purported to be, it is sad that you have someone who would make that choice.
And he said it was not he. Joining me now, NBC White House correspondent Kristen Welker, NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, and Washington Post deputy editorial page editor Ruth Marcus. Kristen, first to you, the tumult of the last 24 hours, not even 24 hours, extraordinary, and the word volcanic says everything, doesn't it?
It says everything, Andrea. The fact that President Trump erupted with volcanic anger, according to multiple sources, trying to determine who exactly would have written this op-ed. And really the broader point here, which is this is a president who now doesn't know who he can trust. There is finger pointing within this administration. I spoke with a source familiar with the thinking inside the White House overnight who said this, Andrea, we're in this together and we're focused on the policy and the political travel that the president has. It is serious work that we're doing. So a sense that they are closing ranks here to some extent. But again, trying to figure out who this person is who would write this op-ed, and the fact, Andrea, that it echoes something in Bob Woodward's book, which is that there are top officials who, from their perspective, feel as though they need to protect the country from the president. You saw that in some of the excerpts from Woodward's book, Fear, in which former top aide Rob Porter, Gary Cohn would swipe papers from the president's desk to keep him from signing on to certain policies that they deemed dangerous. There is a broader concern within Trump world that this is going to undercut the president's ability to carry out his legislative agenda, that this is a crisis within this administration and thereby potentially for the country. And what does it mean for the midterms, Andrea? That's the other real concern within Republican circles. Could this not make it even more difficult for Republicans to hold on to the House? President Trump will be on the campaign trail a little bit later on today when he heads to Montana, Andrea.
And to that very point, Paul Ryan now speaking out, one of his regular news conferences, Casey Hunt. One of the issues here is what will be the impact on the Republican leaders who many people, including Republicans outside of the Hill, say have really been pretty much spineless against what the president has done, the dysfunction of this White House, the descriptions and Bob Woodward's book and our own reporting for many, many months. You were there, Paul Ryan, just moments ago. I want to play it and ask you on the other side.
A person who works in the administration serves at the pleasure of the president. It's a person who obviously is living